On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we preview cornerback. I'm going to tell you why I think by the end of the summer, we may not think Darius Slay is one of the two best cornerbacks on this defense. All that and more coming your way on this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Monday edition of the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. Playoffs wind down. The sports continue to sports like we want them to. But the summer, it does wind down a little bit. FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today, we're wrapping up our positional previews with cornerback. And it's funny, this is the last position that we're talking about, because this has been the position that I wanted to talk about more than any other. It's my favorite position. It's the one I played growing up. It's the one the Eagles, I would say, throughout my lifetime as a fan, have had the most trouble with. I would say outside of linebacker, I'd say of the positions they actually care about, cornerback has been the one that they're the most inconsistent with, right? I think that's actually the right way to go about it. Although wide receiver, there were some lulls, some really down times like 2019, 2020. But in between that, you had, on one side, Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar. On the other side, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown. Cornerback outside of Darius Slay and James Bradberry in 2020 and the Super Bowl season of 2017, but for the majority of my life as an Eagles fan, they have not been able to get cornerback right. Well, this year, that looks like the opposite of the case. I think this year, the cornerback position for the Eagles looks as deep as I've ever seen it on paper, with young talent, so much potential, top draft picks in the first and second round, veterans that have been all pros, versatile pieces, like you name it, what you want from this group. The Eagles, as of right now, they have it. And honestly, there's nothing I'm looking forward to more for training camp and when it comes to the preseason than this cornerback battle. It's going to be a complete battle royale between 10 to 11 guys that could say that they have earned a right to be on this roster, and only probably 6 or 7 of them at most will make this team. So I can't wait to talk about cornerback. But before we get into everything about this position with Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, the upside of Kelee Ringo, the potential of Isaiah Rodgers and Eli Ricks, the future of James Bradberry and Avonte Maddox, the one thing I want to talk about first that I thought about, because this isn't really being brought up, and maybe it's because the focus for the veterans is more on, hey, are they going to trade James Bradberry? Are they just going to release him upright? What is Avonte Maddox outright, I should say? What is Avonte Maddox going to be for this team this year on a one-year deal with little to no money? What is he going to be, right? Is he going to play safety? Is he going to be a slot cornerback? Is he going to get cut? What are the young guys going to be in their first, second, third seasons? Darius Slay quietly is just not really being talked about. He's going under the radar, and I don't know if it's for better or for worse. When it comes to Slay, like last year, was he as bad as James Bradberry? Absolutely not. Was he somebody that you couldn't rely on because of injuries like Avonte Maddox? No. I mean, he had that surgery at the end of the year that I didn't love, but he came back before the playoffs, and overall, Darius Slay last year was still a serviceable corner. But he wasn't the All-Pro of 2021. He was not the All-Pro of 2022. And I do wonder this year, like he's going to start, the Eagles really value that mentorship kind of setup between a veteran and a young player that eventually is going to take over their role, right? You saw that with Cam Jurgens and Jason Kelce last year. You look at Quinyon Mitchell, the Eagles' first-round pick. Who did he emulate his game after growing up? It was Darius Slay. He told that to me personally at the Senior Bowl when I interviewed him. He said, I've tried to be like Darius Slay more than any other cornerback in the NFL. So the Eagles see that and they say, hey, Darius Slay is still under contract for another 2 years. Yeah, he's over 30, but he still has his speed. Is he an all-pro? No, but he's still a pretty solid corner. This is a perfect setup where Darius Slay's on one side, Quinyon Mitchell's on the other, and then we figure out the slot. And then we figure out our long-term boundary corner through training camp. Is it going to be Kelee Ringo? Is it going to be Isaiah Rodgers, Eli Ricks? Right now, we have the flexibility of seeing how those players develop, but at the same time, still having Darius Slay in-house. And I think that's going to be the way it is. I'm not about to say that I think Darius Slay is not going to be on this football team in 2024. But I did have this thought the other day because Kelee Ringo was so impressive during OTAs, as was Isaiah Rodgers. Isaiah Rodgers is a player that during a season before with another football team was a top 10 graded cornerback on the outside, according to Pro Football Focus. In 2022, Isaiah Rodgers was a top 10 corner when it comes to coverage grade on the boundary for Indianapolis. Like, that's not just some, it was only a 12-game sample size, but that's not just something to just throw out. Kelee Ringo was a player that a lot of people thought had day one, first, second round potential that you traded a future third round pick to trade up for. And he had a really good end of the season in 2023. He followed that up by looking as good as anybody on this roster, not just cornerback, but anybody in the spring. So I asked the question, Darius Slay had the worst year, and again, it wasn't a terrible season, but compared to his standard he set, 2023 was the worst season Darius Slay has had since he came to Philadelphia in 2020. With all that being said, is Darius Slay, do we know for a fact, I think it's probably correct, and 86% of you on this poll on Twitter say that you believe it, but do we know for a fact that Darius Slay is one of your two best outside corners for 2024? I think he is right now, but what if Kelee Ringo dominates training camp? What if Isaiah Rodgers looks really good in the preseason, and then maybe those guys start making plays in the regular season because of injuries? Will there come a time this year, maybe not if you're contending and Slay is, holding his ground and he's not great, but he's pretty solid still. Is there ever a time where we're going to say, hey, maybe it's bold to do this at such an important position, but what if we go all in on the young guys? What if we just go Quinyon Mitchell, Kelee Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, Cooper DeJean? There are four corners we're playing the majority of the year, and we just go forward with the future. Is there a scenario where that plays out? I would probably say no, unless a team came to you in the summer at the trade deadline and said, hey, we'll give you a second or third round pick for Darius Slay. And in this scenario, the Eagles probably are not contending, which I can't imagine that scenario because I think Philly's going to be a top 2, top 3 team in the NFC. But is there a way they think Darius Slay, they have the flexibility of not needing him as much as they do right now because those young kids are so good? Even if they end up keeping him and starting him, I wonder if there's a time where we're going to say, kind of like 2020 with Alshon Jeffrey being ahead of some of the younger receivers, hey, yes, Darius Slay's starting and we see the benefit of that, but I think the younger kids right now are better overall players. I don't think that's a stretch. Right now it feels like it because Ringo is so unproven and Isaiah Rodgers, we have such a small sample size of him being great in the regular season, and he's coming off a year where he didn't play football at all. But if this trajectory continues, I just wonder if at some point there will be some thoughts inside the NovaCare complex where someone says, hey, are the young guys ready? Do we just go forward with the future? I'm not saying trade Darius Slay. I'm not saying cut him like I think they should with James Bradberry, Avonte Maddox. All I'm saying is I wonder if there will come a time where we say, I think he's not one of the top 2 best cornerbacks on the team, and I don't think that's a stretch. I don't think that's a bold take to say that. I don't think it would be crazy to say that Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, or Quinyon Mitchell and Kelee Ringo, or Kelee Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers are both better than Darius Slay. And it's again, not a diss to Darius Slay, who's been a great player, and I still think is very good. It's more of a compliment to how talented I think these young corners are for the Eagles. And the future looks so bright for the first time in a long time at this position. They've had some really good years at corner 2 years ago, Darius Slay and James Bradberry, but we knew that wasn't a 5 to 10 year plan. Slay and Bradberry were already inching towards 30. That wasn't a long-term solution. It helped to get to a Super Bowl, but right now I feel so good because not only do I think this position group is going to be great and versatile in 2024, but I think with all of the young guys they have, this position is set for the longest period of time that I've ever witnessed as an Eagles fan, and that is a really good feeling. I want to get into more as we preview cornerback right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Got to turn down the volume because of all the shouting? We'll make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we are wrapping up our positional previews before training camp with cornerback. And the big question that I have heading into the summer is, if at the end of the summer, heading into the regular season, if I'll feel like Darius Slay is still one of the Eagles' two best outside corners. And right now he is. I still think that even with Kelee Ringo's potential and the production in the spring, and same with Isaiah Rodgers and the first and second round value and potential of a Quinyon Mitchell and a Cooper DeJean. With all of that being said, and the downside of Slay last year, I still think he's one of the guys that should be starting on the outside. I think the Eagles have the right plan right now. I don't think he should be grouped in with James Bradberry, where I'm like, you just got to get him off the roster and clear a spot open for the young guys. I think Slay still holds a lot of value this year, and even if there does come to a point where I'd say, hey, I think Ringo's a little bit better right now, there's still value to starting Slay over those guys and having him on this football team. But I don't think it's bold to say at some point this year, maybe it's not through training camp in the preseason, maybe it's not the first month of the regular season, maybe it's the second half of the year, there might come a point where I say, I think it's time to turn to Quinyon, Ringo, Rodgers, DeJean. This is the future of this football team. Even in the first or second year of those guys' careers, that's how much I think of those players. That's something I'm very confident in. With Kelee Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers and even Cooper DeJean to a degree, there's potential there, but I'm also more hesitant to say slam dunk, like these are the guys. That's why I said they had to draft a player in the first round, trade up even for a Quinyon Mitchell or a Terrion Arnold, because, I would have been okay with taking Cooper DeJean in the first round or Kool-Aid McKinstry, or running it back with Kelee Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers and saying, hey, we believe a lot in those two and Eli Ricks, and we're going to invest in their future while Darius Slay and James Bradberry develop those players. Like, I would have been okay with that to a degree, but I'm glad that they didn't settle for that and they went all in getting a top prospect like Quinyon Mitchell, because he, unlike Ringo, Rodgers, DeJean, Ricks, unlike those guys, I'm feeling personally, and some might not because of the Toledo thing and because he's a rookie, but I'm feeling like it's a slam dunk that, and I'm trying not to jinx it, I'm knocking on wood as we speak, I think it's a slam dunk that Quinyon Mitchell will be a star from the start. And I think it's also something I'm very confident in, that he's going to start from the start. Like, I don't think there's a chance. I really hope not. I hope the Eagles learn from their, mistakes of 2018, 2019, 2020, where sometimes they held back their younger, more talented players, whether it was because of scheme fit or development or because of the win now mentality of that window, of that era. There were times that Rasul Douglas was put on the bench in favor of a Jalen Mills or a Ronald Darby. There were times even on the other side of the football that a Jason Peters was playing over Jordan Mailata, or Alshon Jeffrey was playing over younger receivers. And I think the Eagles, based on Howie Roseman's comments this year about giving their top picks chances to play, seeing through those investments, I do want to believe they learned from those errors from 2018 to 2020, and they're going to start Quinyon Mitchell right away. They're not going to plug and play James Bradberry and hope he's the 2022 version again. I hope that they get rid of him. Don't even have him on the roster. I hope they don't keep Cooper DeJean off the field in favor of Avonte Maddox. I hope they don't try to redshirt these guys like they have certain prospects over the last few years because they had star veterans. At cornerback, you don't have those star veterans. You have veterans that have been stars before, but as much as I still like Darius Slay right now, he's not a star worth keeping Quinyon Mitchell off the field for. Neither is James Bradberry. Avonte Maddox is not a player worth keeping Cooper DeJean off the field for. And that was my point about Slay is if there comes a point where Ringo or Rodgers are substantially better than that veteran, maybe it's not even Slay, maybe it's somebody else, you should not keep those younger players that are going to be part of this future off the football team. And I think the Eagles, I'm very confident they've learned from that. Quinyon Mitchell is going to start from week 1, and I'm confident you're going to get a Rookie of the Year kind of season out of him. I think you're going to get a Reek Woolen, a Derek Stingley, a Sauce Gardner, a Patrick Surtain type of year where we say, okay, this was another steal, where Quinyon Mitchell had no business falling into the 20s on day 1. Some people might not feel that strongly about this because he did go to Toledo, because he played 99% of the time zone coverage, and you still might have doubts about him as a press man corner, although Vic Fangio's defense is primarily zone. And you might not believe the Senior Bowl was a big enough sample size. I do. I saw it in person. I saw the tape from Toledo, the physical traits, the speed, the click and close mentality, the vision, the ball skills. It all translates, whether he's a man coverage corner or zone. Quinyon Mitchell, to me, was CB1 for a reason, even over a guy that played at Alabama like a Terrion Arnold. The question to me is about Darius Slay and about these other younger players. The thing that I'm very confident in, that I don't have many questions about, is Quinyon. The only question I have is if he's going to continue to wear number 30, because that's not CB1 energy, but I think I'm very confident that Mitchell is going to be CB1 this year. I think he'll be your best corner, that even over Slay, you're saying when they play the Dallas Cowboys, hey, Quinyon, you're on CeeDee Lamb all game. Follow him on the boundary, in the slot. Don't let him get out of your sights. That's something I'm very confident in, is Quinyon Mitchell being a stud from the jump. It's going to be interesting, though. I can't wait to watch this battle royale. I mean, there is so many. Again, like I said earlier, I don't know how you're going to be able to get rid of any of these guys. If you don't get rid of Darius Slay, and again, I'm not suggesting they do, Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, Cooper DeJean, those 3, in my opinion, are your starters, with Cooper DeJean in the slot. Then your guys that rotate in are Kelee Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers, so you have 5 guys already. I haven't even mentioned Avonte Maddox yet, who, based on the way they're cross-training him as a slot safety hybrid, he'll be on the roster as that number 6 guy. James Bradberry's still on this team. I'd say he's getting cut, but for now he's on the team. So that's 7 corners already that should be on an NFL roster that are on the Eagles defense. And then I haven't even mentioned special teamers that have flashed at times. Josh Jobe, Zech McPherson, Eli Ricks. I mean, I just mentioned like 9 to 10 players at this position that have been on this team before, that have been on other teams before, that have made plays, that were really good in college, that are versatile. I mean, Vic Fangio has his pick. Like, what do you want? You have everything at this spot. And that is extremely exciting. And I think it's the position that most people are looking forward to watching the most at Eagles training camp. We'll continue to talk corners. We wrap up our positional previews right here on this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, when you talk about things that you compare your life to, when it comes to others specifically, does social media play a part in that? Like when you're comparing your life to somebody, how much does Instagram come into play, or Twitter or Facebook? What do you do when you get caught up wishing your life looked like somebody else's? Comparison, and I've learned this a lot in my life, and I learned this through therapy, through BetterHelp. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives that they fluff up on social media. It might look like they have it all together on their Instagram, but in reality, they don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want in your life instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life for you. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing yourself to others. Start focusing on you with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We're wrapping up this Monday edition of the podcast, previewing cornerback, and it is a deep group with a lot of talent, both young and old. Overall, I'm just excited that I'm very confident. I'm excited to feel confident again in this position that they're going to get back to who they were at the spot 2 years ago. And I think that is so crucial. Like, yes, have the Eagles won with or in spite of cornerback at times growing up? For me as a 27-year-old Eagles fan, absolutely. You look at 2017, the year they won the Super Bowl, they didn't win in spite of cornerback, I'd say. As much as I wasn't a big Ronald Darby and Jalen Mills guy, they were okay. They were serviceable. You won with them. You could win with them because you had an elite front seven in front of them and also 2 elite safeties behind them, and a good defensive coordinator in Jim Schwartz. But you didn't win because of Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby. You look at all those other playoff runs, like 2013. I mean, these are all wild card rounds. 2010, you had Asante Samuel. But who was on the other side? It was Ellis Hobbs and then Dimitri Patterson. 2013, the first Chip Kelly year, it was Bradley Fletcher and Kerry Williams. I mean, you look at 2017 to 2019, it was Mills, it was Darby. As much as I love Zool, he wasn't the player he is now in 2018. Avonte Maddox, Cravon LeBlanc, Sidney Jones making plays at the end of 2019. Like, you weren't winning in spite of these guys at times, but you weren't winning because of them. 2022, you were winning because of cornerback, and it showed you, again, you don't have to, like, you can win without elite cornerback play. But if you have it, it is such a game changer because it helps, so much. The front seven can help your back end getting to the quarterback fast, right? But it's the other way as well. Your cornerbacks, your secondary, can do wonders for your defensive line. It's not a coincidence, and not to discredit the Eagles' defensive front of 2022. They were historically talented on the edge, on the interior. They were deep with young and veteran players. Again, they almost broke the Chicago Bears' all-time sack record in a single season with over 70. But having all pros like Darius Slay and James Bradbury, an elite slot corner like Avonte Maddox at the time, an elite safety like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Marcus Epps, Reed Blankenship, having an elite secondary like that, it goes a long way in helping your front. It's not a coincidence that you went to the Super Bowl the year you had that figured out with Slay and Bradbury. And I think last year, it's also not a coincidence. Some of the differences with your defense from one year to the next was that, like, the difference, you were not nearly as dominant in 2023 as 2022. And although you could say, sure, you lost Javon Hargrave and Linval Joseph and Dominican Sue, their defensive line still had almost all of their studs from the year before, and you had Jordan Davis healthy. You added Nolan Smith. You added Jalen Carter. Your defensive line still had talent. What was the difference? Sure, you could say it was defensive coordinator going from Gannon to Desai, but I think a huge part of it was you didn't have that talent on the back seven anymore. You didn't have that same high-end play at cornerback. James Bradbury went from an all-pro to a liability. Darius Slay went from an elite corner to an okay corner. And that was one of the biggest reasons you weren't the same team last year. There are so many reasons you weren't the same team last year as the Super Bowl 2022 run, but a main reason was cornerback not being good enough. And this year, again, there's a lot of what-ifs on this defense, including this position. It's extremely young. Quinyon Mitchell has not played a down yet of pro football. He played in the MAC for years. There is a lot of questions with Quinyon Mitchell. Isaiah Rodgers had 12 really good games and then didn't play a single game last year. Kelee Ringo had a good 5-6 game stretch down the stretch of 2023, but that's really it. Avonte Maddox can't stay healthy. Darius Slay is regressing. There's a lot of what-ifs at corner this year, but there's a lot of good that could come from this position as well. And I think I'm very confident that we're going to get the positive scenario playing out here. I think because there's so many players, law of averages, a few of these guys are going to become studs. Between Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Kelee Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, and Eli Ricks, who I still really like a lot. I like Ricks. Of those 5 corners, you're telling me at least 2 of them aren't going to pan out? I think at least 2 of them are going to pan out, and I think more will. You're telling me between James Bradbury, Avonte Maddox, and Darius Slay, one of them is not going to be serviceable in 2024. Plus, you add the improved safety play behind them with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back, Sidney Brown when he gets healthy. In year 2, Reed Blankenship with a new extension. I think the secondary is going to get back to who they were 2 years ago, especially because they have a much better defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio with a much better scheme. He's going to get the best out of these players. I trust that Fangio is someone that can develop this young talent. Unlike last year, I would not have wanted to put Quinyon Mitchell's development in the hands of Sean Desai or Matt Patricia. Cornerback this year is going to be so much fun to watch. It's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to this year, honestly, outside of just watching the Eagles make another Super Bowl run, seeing Saquon Barkley in Midnight Green. Like, the thing I can't wait for the most is seeing the secondary, new and improved, getting back to who they were. Again, I'm a former cornerback myself. I love this position as much as Gino loves safety. And it feels really good right now that Howie Roseman finally took the time to say, I'm going all in on the spot. I'm drafting one, not only in the first round for the first time in over 15 years, but I'm taking another one in the second round who's versatile. Cooper DeJean now, because I have Quinyon Mitchell and Kelee Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers and Darius Slay, I can use in a way that maximizes his ceiling more as a do-it-all Swiss Army knife instead of him being just a boundary corner, which I think he could be very good at, but Cooper DeJean's ceiling is maximizing it. It's in the slot, it's at safety, it's on the boundary, it's roaming around the formation. That's what he can do. And you can do all this because Howie invested that first in Quinyon, the second in Cooper, taking Kelee Ringo, trading up for him last year, trading for Isaiah Rodgers. He's made sure that he has a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C at the spot. And that's good because cornerback, it used to drive me nuts when people would kind of clump it in with linebacker and safety. No, cornerback is as important as receiver, as some offensive line positions, defensive line. To me, it's an island position. Like, island positions are crucial. And considering how many good receivers are in the NFL right now and how many teams have 2, 3, 4 amazing passing targets, you need not only one great corner for the long term, but you need 2 now, or 3. You need 3 to 4 really good defensive backs. And the Eagles, it feels like for years growing up, maybe they had them for 1 year, but then it would change the next year because they wouldn't pay them or they wouldn't draft their replacements. And then they'd get another guy back. But it was always in the short term. It was always a free agent veteran. It was always trading for somebody. It was never the sustained strategy that Howie is following right now. And that makes me feel very optimistic. Let me know what you think. Hit us up on Twitter at LockedOnBirds and at DiBiase LOE. That will do it for our positional previews heading into Philadelphia Eagles training camp right here on Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. That'll do it for today's show. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening. And let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.